Today we are continuing our Showdown series where we look at the various people Calvin clashed and debated with and set those disagreements in historical and theological context. We have just finished looking at certainly the most famous showdown of Calvin's life with Michael Servetus. But today we are going to look at a showdown which may or may not be as well known to our listeners. And this is Calvin's showdown with Albert Pighius. We'll get into more detail about their theological differences in upcoming episodes. But today we're going to focus on understanding Pighius himself from a historical perspective and how it was that he and Calvin came into contact with each other. I just want to begin by acknowledging my debt to Lane and Davies' translation of John Calvin's Bondage and Liberation of the Will. I would highly recommend getting that book if you want to better understand Calvin's clash with Pighius. Most of what I've got to say in this series is based on the amazing work that was done putting this book together. The introduction is also very, very helpful for understanding what was going on. So Pighius was born in Kampen in Holland around 1490. In 1507, he studied philosophy and theology at Leuven, and he stayed in Leuven until 1517. By the way, I highly recommend visiting Leuven if you get a chance. It's in modern-day Belgium, and it's a beautiful, thriving university city and is well worth visiting. A bit like Calvin in his early days, Pighius was very much a humanist, this fashionable, edgy, scholarly movement flowing through Europe at this time, so free inquiry, getting back to the proper historical sources. Interestingly, in this early period, all of Pighius's writings were on astronomy rather than theology. You kind of wonder if Pighius might have been better off sticking with astronomy rather than theology, because as time goes on, Pighius finds his ideas are rejected, not only by Calvin and the Reformers, but also, as we'll see, increasingly by Roman Catholics. So a key life-changing date in Pighius's life is 1522. Because in 1522, one of his teachers from university, Adrian Florence, becomes the Pope, and Pope Adrian VI asks Pighius to join him in Rome. And obviously when the Pope comes calling, that's hardly an opportunity you can turn down. Pighius is an eager Roman Catholic humanist scholar, and this must surely have felt like the opportunity of a lifetime for him, so he goes to Rome. And it's while he's in Rome that he increasingly turns his attention away from astronomy to theology. Pope Adrian unfortunately dies 1 year, 8 months into being Pope, but Pighius continues to serve under the next two popes. Another key point in Pighius's life is 1535, because in 1535 Pighius is made provost and archdeacon of St. John's Church, Utrecht, in the Netherlands. From this point onwards, Pighius is probably at his most well-known and influential. As Lane puts it in that book I mentioned earlier, Pighius rose to prominence as one of the most influential Roman Catholic polemicists against Protestantism. He sent as part of a Roman Catholic delegation to the interconfessional colloquies at Worms and Regensburg in 1540 and 1541. But as Lane puts it, his unremittingly hostile attitude towards Protestantism did not fit him well for such a role, and his Catholic colleagues took care to marginalize him. Indeed, it has been suggested that Pighius was appointed in order to act as a dampener upon the proceedings. Calvin was also at Worms and Regensburg, where he presumably met Pighius. Now, that is a meeting I would have loved to have witnessed. Two titans of Reformed and humanist thought, respectively, coming together to debate and exchange ideas. So what did Pighius really care about? What motivated him? Well, he writes a book called A Defense of the Ecclesiastical Hierarchy. And as you can imagine by a book with a name like that, he argues passionately for papal infallibility. He argues that the pronouncements of the Pope ought to be regarded as the third principle of faith alongside scripture and tradition. He even argued, in a move that no doubt would have horrified Calvin, that a pope is incapable of becoming a heretic. And as Lane points out, Pighius argues this despite the fact that we know that Pope Honorius I at the Third Council of Constantinople was declared to be a heretic. The showdown between Calvin and Pighius really kicks off in 1539. By this stage, Calvin has massively revised and expanded the Institutes. It's now 3 times longer than the first edition and has gone from 6 chapters to 17. Calvin is now 30 years of age and growing into an able and formidable theologian. So much so that when a chap called Cardinal Marcello Cervini reads this new edition of Calvin's Institutes, he can see that Calvin is much more dangerous than the other Lutheran writings he's come across previously. Calvin is coherent, he's sharp, he knows and can quote the Church Fathers from memory. And so he asks Albert Pighius to respond to this new and dangerous version of Calvin's Institutes. In August 1542, Pighius publishes his response called 10 Books on Human Free Choice and Divine Grace. In it, he structures the book around Chapter 2 and Chapter 8 of Calvin's second version of the Institutes. The first section deals with free choice, and the second section deals with predestination. Already there, you can see where Pighius feels the strongest revulsion to Calvin's ideas, and it's in the realm of free choice, or perhaps the lack of it as Pighius sees it in Calvin's understanding of the bondage of the human will, and in Calvin's doctrine of predestination. Interestingly, Pighius is not so different from Calvin's detractors today, who often struggle with these two issues as they see them in Calvin's theology. So Pighius releases this book directly attacking Calvin. Calvin reads his work and vows to respond. But time is not on Calvin's side, because the 1543 Frankfurt Book Fair is approaching with speed. Remember, this is a world where the printing press is relatively new. There's no television, internet, or electricity. So Frankfurt Book Fair was this huge event in any merchant or scholar's diary. And this was how you would get your ideas out there. So Calvin has to work at speed. In the end, he's only able to respond to the first 6 of Pighius's books focused on Calvin's understanding of free choice. And this he does manage to finish, on time for the 1543 Frankfurt Book Fair. The full title of the book was Defense of the Sound, an orthodox doctrine of the bondage and liberation of human choice against the misrepresentations of Albert Pighius of Kampen. Calvin also intended to write a response to Pighius on predestination for the 1544 Frankfurt Book Fair, but in that time Pighius died, so Calvin says he decided to stop his book project against Pighius in order, quote, not to insult a dead dog. After Pighius' death, as time goes on, his ideas are increasingly rejected, not only by the Reformers, but also by Roman Catholics. This is because Pighius argues for a heretical doctrine of original sin, a fact that Calvin points out to Pighius. The Council of Trent evaluated Pighius' doctrine of original sin and came to same conclusion, and his work was placed on the Index of Prohibited Books. Essentially, Pighius argues that the effects of the fall of Adam were the introduction of death and guilt to all humanity. But Pighius denies that the fall corrupted human nature. As Lane helpfully summarizes Pighius' position, the lust that human beings experience derives from nature as created and was experienced by Adam before the fall. Calvin also complains that Pighius plagiarized his institutes and even copied big chunks of his work, so this was a clash that was theological, but also in many respects personal for Calvin. In the next few episodes, we will dive into Calvin and Pighius' debate about free choice in more detail. The one thing I really should say as I finish is that my analysis of Calvin and Pighius is a bit limited and dependent on the work Lane and Davies have done in putting Calvin's bondage and liberation of the will into English. That means that the analysis of Pighius's own view in his own words might be slightly limited because none of his works have been translated into English. So I say that just to acknowledge the limitations of this series, but I hope that it is still interesting and helpful in understanding a lesser-known clash in Calvin's life. Goodbye.